Hi, welcome to this lesson, going through the laws of indices. Just cover most of the things you need to know for GCSE and maths. So starting with the basics, show these basic rules that when you're multiplying powers, to get the answer you need to add those powers together. So this will be a to the 9, and when you divide the indices, you want to subtract the powers. So 10 minus 3 is 7, so this will be b to the power 7. Moving on from that, we have these slightly more full or complete rules, where from a multiplication question you want to multiply the numbers and add the powers. So you would do 3 times 5 is 15, and then you would add the powers together. Note there's no power here. Whenever a number is missing in maths, basically means that number is always 1. So y by itself means the same thing as y to the power of 1. So now when you add the powers together, we're going to get 15y to the power of 5. Same idea with dividing. When we're dividing two things, you want to divide the numbers and subtract the powers. Again, we have no number here, which means that number is 1. a to the 5 is the exact same thing as 1 lot of a to the 5. Now following the rule, divide the numbers. So 7 divided by 1 is 7. Subtract the powers, 11 minus 5 is 6. So it's 7a to the 6. And again, when you do it, make sure remember to include these letters. Too often I just see it written as 15 to the 5 or 7 to the 6. You have to include the letters that are part of the question. So we can now look at these harder problems. Okay, again, I don't see it that simple for GCSE. They tend to add a few more tricks to it. And we're going to look at these now. First, we have this type of problem, multiple letters. This is the exact same idea. However, you're going to treat each number and letter separately. So first you do the numbers. You would do 4 times 5 is 20. You would then add together the powers. 3 plus 4 is 7, so it's a to the 7. And then we add the powers again for b. So 2 plus 2 is 4, so it's b to the 4. So each number and letter must be done separately. Just seeing that again, and again a recap of an earlier rule. Here we have some powers missing, so it means those powers are 1. Now we multiply our numbers together. 2 times 3 is 6. We add together our powers for d. 1 plus 4 is 5. And we also add together our powers for e. 1 plus 5 is 6. And that's it. So it's fairly straightforward. And it's the exact same idea with division. You would do each number and letter separately. So 20 divided by 4 is 5. You would then look at the powers of m. So we subtract here. So 5 take away 2 is 3. And then we also look at our powers of n. So 4 take away 2 is 2. And again, seeing that in a different form. No powers, that power is 1. We do our numbers first. So 24 divided by 3 is 8. We look at our powers of p. 3 minus 1 is 2. We look at our powers of q. However, there's only 1, and that means it's not going to change. Okay? And again, if q to the 5 was on the bottom, let me just change that. If it was this question, you can also just leave on the bottom the answer as well. That's absolutely fine to do. But if there's only one letter, then of course nothing happens to it. There's nothing to do with it except keep it the exact same form it's currently in. Moving on to the next type of question. This way basically you've got some big thing, like this indice, and the whole thing is squared, cubed, or whatever. So just as recap, squared means times by itself. So 4 squared means 4 times 4, which of course gives you 16. Looking at it for this question, if you're 4x to the 5 all squared, that means 4x to the 5 times 4x to the 5. And now it's the exact same kind of question as one we was solving earlier. We're going to multiply the numbers and add the powers. So 4 times 4 is 16, 5 plus 5 is 10, so it is 16x to the power of 10. Same idea again, this time we've got a cubed. Cube means we want 3 copies of it, 3 copies all times together. So your first step, you want to basically expand out this power. So write it in long form. So we have 2y to the 4z times 2y to the 4z times 2y to the 4z. And then just as we said before, we're going to do each number and letter separately. So first the numbers, 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 again is 8. Next the y's. Here we add the powers, so we do 4 plus 4 plus 4, which is 12. So it'll be 8y to the power of 12. We have no letters for the z's, so that means that number is 1. And again, we add those powers, so 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. So it will be 8y to the 12, z to the 3, or z cubed. And that's it. So for these questions, Make sure you remember what the cube means, write it out in long form, and then solve it the exact same way we'll do for multiplication. Do each number and letter separately. Okay, moving on, what we'll look at now is when they ask you to work out some of the indices. These typically use negative fractional indices. So starting off with the basics, if you had 2 cubed, that means 2 times 2 times 2, which gives you 8 as we just said. 2 squared is 2 times 2, which gives you 4. 2 to the 1 is just 1, 2, which is 2. I'm going to use this to sort of work out the pattern that will let us get these 0 and negative powers. So you should hopefully see that as we go down each power, we're dividing by 2. And it turns out that in maths, basically all patterns just carry on. You can always use a pattern to work out things you don't already know. So 2 to the 0 means you have no 2's. This isn't an answer of 0, it's an answer of 1. Okay, so basically every 0th power is always 1. Moving on, 2 to the minus 1, we have to divide by 2 again. So that's going to be 1/2, or 0.5. We need to divide by 2 again to get 2 to the minus 2. That is going to be 1/4, or 1 over 2 times 2. And lastly, if you want 2 to the minus 3, we have to divide by 2 again. So it goes from 1/4 to 1/8, or 1 over 2 times 2 times 2. And here you can kind of see the pattern working in full. That for every negative power is basically 1 over what it was for the positive power. So what I mean is, if I look at these two, you can kind of see that 2 to the minus 3 is just 1 over 2 to the 3. And that's kind of the key rule for negative indices. If you want to work out a negative power, it's just 1 over that positive power. The other key rule right now is that any number to the power 0 is always 1. Okay, so let's see a couple of quick questions. Now we've seen those key rules. So if you want to work out 14 to the minus 1, that is just 1 over 14 to the 1, and 14 to the 1 is just 14, so it's just 1 over 14. And again, anything to the power 0 is always 1. Going again, 3 to the minus 2, so we've got a minus power, you want to write it as 1 over, and then get rid of the minus sign, so it's 1 over 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, so it's 1 over 9. And 3 to 0, anything to the power 0 is always 1. Just quickly, for these questions, they use the word evaluate. Evaluate means work out or give some sort of better answer than we've currently given you. This is in contrast to the early questions. When you saw something like this, they will always label it as a simplify question. So if it's simplify, you keep the letters in it. If it says evaluate, then we're trying to work out what number that should give us. It basically means work it out and give us a number. Okay, moving on to fractional indices. These are getting slightly harder. So 9 to a half, it's kind of slightly awkward to explain. The best way I've seen it explained is if you had 9 to a half times 9 to a half, we know this will work by adding the powers. So this will be 9 to the 1, because half plus half is 1, which is just 9. You then can look at this and think, okay, what number, when I multiply it by itself, gives me 9? And the answer to that is 3. We know 3 times 3 is 9. So when it stands to reason that 9 to a half equals 3. And that's our next rule, where if you have a power of a half, that means the square root. So 4 to a half means the square root of 4, which in this case is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. If we had a third, I won't explain it, but follow the same logic. Rather than being a square root, this would be a cube root. So this here means the cube root. This little 3 means the cube root. And that question is that's basically saying, what number, when I multiply by itself 3 times, gives me 8? And I think you might have seen it at some point, that number is 2. Because 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 again gives us 8. Okay, we can combine this with negative indices as well. So here we have 49 to the power of minus a half. Your first step, whenever you see a minus sign, will be to get rid of that minus sign. So to do that, we're going to write it as 1 over. So it'll be 1 over 49 to a half. Then remember, the power of a half means the same thing as a square root. So it's 1 over the square root of 49, and the square root of 49 is 7. Okay, really common style of question. Okay, that's what I tend to see in most uses at some point, is to give you a minus half power to work out. Let's try this one just like that. Here we have 1000 to the minus a quarter. So looks a bit more scary now, but we'll go through it the same way. First step, get rid of the minus power. So it's going to be 1 over 1,000 to the power of a quarter. Power of a quarter just means the fourth root. So in other words, what number times by itself 4 times is going to give you 1,000. These questions are never hard. They basically always have to be whole number answers. So this has to be something really nice, and you can normally guess it. For this one, it is just 10. Because 10 times 10 times 10 and a fourth 10 would give you 1,000. Okay. Okay, we've got a couple more things to do, and that's pretty much it with main things in indices. What we'll tend to throw at you, especially a lot on exams, is indices with fractions. So we'll start at the basics. We have 2/3 all squared. With fractions, you can do each part by itself. So this basically means work out 2 squared over 3 squared. So 2 squared is 4, and 3 squared is 9. Okay, and that's it. That's very basic. What you normally see is something with, again, a negative or fractional power. Here, this minus power, we would normally do 1 over it all. Whenever you want to do 1 over for a fraction, you just turn the fraction upside down. So it'll just be 5 over 4 to the 1. Okay, let's keep going. I know it's getting slightly harder. Here we've got a half. Remember, a half means the square root. And again, to work it out, you would do the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. So the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 4 is 2. So you just square root the top and the bottom both at the same time. Again, we can add that with a minus power. So 9 over 4 to the minus a half. First step, get rid of the minus. That means you do 1 over it. And again, for a fraction, that means you turn the fraction upside down. So we now have 4/9 to the half. Power of a half means square root everything. So we need to square root the 4, which gives us 2, and square root the 9, which gives us 3. Key step here that I think you make mistakes on is going from here to here. So if you've got a minus power for a fraction, you have to turn the fraction upside down. Okay, and onto the same vein, they can also ask for these kind of questions using mixed numbers. To work it out, you would have to write it as a top-heavy fraction. So 2 1/4. You should know that as the same as 9 over 4. So basically you do 2 times 4 plus 1 gives you that 9. The power stays the same. I mean, it's the same question we just saw. The minus a half, which is turned upside down. The half means you square root top and bottom. Seeing that idea again here, we have another fraction. Step 1 as a top-heavy fraction. So 3 times 8 is 24, plus the 3 is 27. So 3 3/8 is the same as 27 over 8 to the minus a third. With the minus, we turn the fraction upside down. So 8 over 27 to the third. And the third means the cube root. So what number times by itself 3 times gives us 8 and 27. Again, these will never be hard or awkward numbers to work out. You can normally guess it straight off the bat. So for the 8, it's 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And for 27, it turns out to be 3. 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 times 3 is 27. So this is just 2/3. Okay. Last thing to do is they can make the fraction indices slightly harder. So everything we've seen so far, we've always had a 1 here. We can also change it to be any number we want, just give us slightly more to work out. This you'll basically do in 2 steps. So first step, you're going to take it to the root, whatever number this is. So what I mean, if we had 9 to the 3/4, you would do the 4th root of 9. If we had 9 to the 2/3, we would do the 3rd root of 9. Because we've got 9 to the 3 over 2, this bit here means the first thing you want to do is take the square root. So we're going to take the square root of 9, and we should know that's 3. Okay? Because we've got a 3 on the top, we then need to raise that to the 3rd power. Okay, so first we do the root based on the number at the bottom of the fraction, and then we raise the power based on what's on top of the fraction. We then have 3 cubed, which I think we saw a second ago was 27. So showing that exact same method again, let's do 16 to the 3 over 2. First step, we have a 2 here. That means you want to do the square root. So you must do the square root of 16, which gives us 4, because 4 times 4 is 16. This number then carries on, so it'll be 4 cubed, which turns out at being 64. And again, if I change that, if it was 5 over 2, it's the exact same idea. You'd square root it first, then it would be 4 to the 5. You'd work that out, which is 1024. Okay, again, the numbers don't get that crazy in non-calc exams, don't worry too much. Okay, we can change a bit. Of course, we can also add negative powers in. So here with the negative power, our first step is to get rid of that minus. So we're going to do 1 over 8 to the 2/3. So again, 1 over, and we lose a negative sign. First step, I said, is you must work out this bottom part here. So we want to take it to the 3rd root. Our first step is going to be to work out the cube root, because it's a 3 this time, of 8. So the cube root of 8 is 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So therefore the cube root of 8 is 2. And this power stays over. Because there was 2 on the top, we now have 2 squared left. 1 over 2 squared is simply just 1 over 4. Okay, and of course we can run this all together to have a fraction with a negative fractional power. So first step, we want to get rid of the negative. To do that, we flip the fraction upside down. So 9 over 4 to the 3 over 2. Then I'm going to do the square roots of both those numbers. There's a 2 on the bottom. That 2 on the bottom means take the square roots. So it's now going to be 3 over 2. And of course, the number on the top stays. So it's now 3 over 2 all cubed. And we now need to cube 2 and 3. So 3 cubed is 27, and 2 cubed is 8. Okay, that's it. That's a lot to take in, but on the plus side, that is everything you need to know pretty much with indices for GCSE maths. Hope that was helpful, and good luck.